My patient chart says I was admitted 2 hours ago. I'm the nurse. I'm standing at the desk right now, badge on, coffee going cold in my hand, and the monitor feed for room 412 is displaying a heart rate that matches mine exactly, beat for beat, every time I check my own pulse against it. I pulled up the census the way I do at the start of every night shift, scanning bed assignments before rounds, and there it was between two names I actually recognized. My own name, room 412, admitted 2 hours ago. Active vitals, updating in real time on the monitor column beside it. The little green line pulsing steady the way every other real patient's line pulses on that same screen. I've worked this floor for 3 years. I know every patient currently on it, know most of their names before I even open a chart. I have never once been admitted here. I was reading my own chart while standing at the nurse's station, my badge still clipped to my scrubs, coffee steam still rising off the cup in my hand. I pressed 2 fingers to my own wrist out of pure reflex, counting against the number on the screen. 71. The monitor read 71. I waited a full 10 seconds and checked again. It moved when mine moved, climbed when mine climbed. The 2 numbers never once disagreeing with each other by so much as a single beat the entire time I stood there watching. I told myself it was a data entry error. Some other patient's vitals feed accidentally routed to a chart with my name typed into the wrong field. Hospital software glitches. It happens more than anyone likes to admit on a floor this size, especially this late into an overnight shift. I looked down the hallway toward room 412 anyway. A room I knew for a fact had been empty an hour ago when I walked past it during my last round, before any of this had shown up on a screen at all. I walked down to 412 instead of paging anyone right away, telling myself I was just confirming an obvious mistake before I bothered another nurse with it this late at night. The door was closed. Not locked, just closed. The small dry erase board beside it wiped clean the way it always is between patients. No name written on it, despite what the system upstairs was insisting so confidently. I pushed it open. The bed was empty, sheets tucked tight and unwrinkled. The kind of maid you only see on a room nobody has actually slept in yet. No belongings on the side table. No chart clipped to the door. Nothing in the room to suggest a single living person had been anywhere near it in hours, maybe longer. The monitor beside the bed was on. I hadn't noticed that at first, focused on the empty bed instead. It sat there quietly humming, a heart rate tracing steady green lines across the screen. 72 now. Climbing the same slow half-beat mine had just climbed, standing in the doorway watching it. I walked closer and pressed my fingers to my wrist again, right there in the empty room, comparing the 2 numbers directly instead of trusting my memory of them from down the hall. They matched, not close, exact, the little peaks on the screen rising and falling in the same rhythm as the pulse under my own skin. A machine in an unoccupied room quietly tracking a body that wasn't lying anywhere near it at all. I backed out of the room without turning the monitor off, some instinct telling me not to touch it yet, and pulled the door shut behind me harder than it needed to be closed, my hand staying on the handle a second longer than necessary. Back at the nurse's station, I pulled up the full chart instead of just the census line, needing to see how far this actually went before I let myself decide it was nothing worth losing sleep over. Admitting physician, a name I didn't recognize from anywhere on this floor, not from any shift I've worked in 3 years here. Diagnosis field, filled in with something vague enough to mean almost anything at all. Insurance identification number, and I stopped scrolling right there, because I recognized that number. It was mine, not similar. Mine. The exact string of digits printed on my own insurance card sitting in my wallet in my locker right now, 1 floor away. I sat with that for longer than I want to admit, refreshing the page twice as if it might correct itself the way real glitches usually do within a few seconds of loading. It didn't correct itself. Allergies field, populated correctly with the one medication I actually can't take. Information nobody on this floor should have any reason to know about me personally. Buried in a chart I'd never created and never should have appeared in at all. I checked the admission timestamp again. It had moved, not by much. 10 minutes closer to right now than it had read the first time I looked, as if the exact moment of admission was still quietly finalizing itself somewhere in the background of the system, patiently waiting for something else to catch up to it. I closed the chart and sat there with my hands flat on the desk, trying to remember the last time I'd actually felt my own heartbeat, instead of just watching a number represented on a screen down the hall. I found another nurse on break in the staff lounge and asked her to come look at something before I could talk myself out of it, keeping my voice as normal as I could manage under the circumstances. She read the chart over my shoulder without saying anything at first, scrolling slowly the way you do when you're trying to find the part that will make sense of the rest of it. Then she said, quietly, that this had to be some kind of test account, some training file someone had built using real staff information by mistake during a system update. I asked if training files usually had live updating vitals attached to them. She didn't answer that directly. She checked the monitor feed herself instead, watched the number climb one beat while we both stood there in silence, and asked, in a voice that had lost some of its earlier certainty, if that was actually happening in real time, or if the screen was just looping old data on a delay. We walked down to 412 together to check the room itself, just to settle it. She saw the same empty bed I had. She saw the same monitor, still on, still tracking. She went quiet, in a way that told me she'd stopped looking for the training file explanation somewhere between the hallway and the doorway of that room. She left not long after that, telling me she needed to get back to her own patients, in the tone of someone who wanted distance from the situation more than she wanted to admit out loud. I didn't blame her. Some part of me wanted the same thing and didn't have anywhere else to go. I called down to records the next morning before my shift, still awake off adrenaline more than sleep, and asked someone to pull whatever history existed for room 412. There was a pause on the line, longer than the question should have needed. Then the woman on the other end said the room itself was real, still standing, still part of the active floor plan. What wasn't active was the bed. According to admissions records, no patient had actually been assigned to that room in 12 years. Not since some kind of system reclassification nobody in her department seemed to fully remember the reason for. I asked how a chart could assign a patient to a bed that hadn't existed in the system for over a decade. She said it shouldn't be possible, that the software wouldn't even offer 412 as an option on a new admission form. The room simply wasn't in the current list of available beds anywhere on the floor. I told her I'd stood in that room the night before. I told her the monitor had been on, tracking a working heart rate the entire time I watched it. She went quiet for a moment, then said, carefully, that no equipment in that room should be drawing power at all, let alone transmitting live data to a connected chart. I went back to that hallway on my next shift specifically to look at the room again. The door was there, ordinary, unremarkable. The plate beside it reading 412 in the same font as every other door on the floor. Nothing about it looked unused. Nothing about it looked like a room that had sat empty, off the books, for 12 straight years. I asked our IT liaison, quietly, if there was any way to pull historical data tied to that room's monitor equipment, even if the bed itself hadn't been active in years, catching him at his desk between tickets and hoping he wouldn't ask too many questions about why. He found something, eventually, buried in old data nobody had fully cleaned out during the last software upgrade. Not a patient file, no name attached to it anywhere, no admission record, just old vital sign readings, logged under room 412, years before I'd even started working at this hospital. I asked him to pull it up next to my own numbers from that week, mostly out of morbid curiosity more than any real expectation of finding anything worth the trouble. They matched, not roughly, exactly, the same resting heart rate, the same small specific fluctuations, rising and dipping in almost the same order. Near the end of the old recording, a short, sharp dip in the rhythm, in the exact same place where my own heart had skipped 3 nights earlier during rounds. He looked at the two graphs for a long time without saying anything, scrolling back and forth between them like he expected one of the lines to eventually admit it had been copied from the other. Then he asked, carefully, if I'd ever had a twin, a relative, anyone at all who might explain 2 different people producing an identical heartbeat down to the smallest irregularity. years apart from each other. I told him no. He didn't have a follow-up question after that, just closed the file and said he'd probably misread the timestamps somewhere, in the voice of someone who already knew he hadn't. 3 nights later, during rounds, I felt my own chest tighten without warning, a hard skip in my heartbeat that made me stop walking and grip the hallway rail to steady myself. The old recording had been history, something that already happened to someone, or something, years before I ever set foot on this floor. This wasn't history. This was happening to me right now, live, in my own chest, in real time. A coworker passing by asked if I was okay, steadying me by the elbow when I didn't answer right away. I told her I was fine, that it was probably just the coffee catching up with me, though some part of me was already walking back toward 412 before I'd consciously decided to go there at all, my feet moving faster than my thinking. The monitor inside showed the exact same skip, not a similar irregularity. The identical pattern, time-stamped to the same second, a brief drop into a flat, unbroken line, lasting less than a moment before both readings, mine and the screen's, recovered together in perfect unison, like 2 instruments finally settling back into the same key. I stood in that doorway with my hand pressed to my own chest, watching a machine in a room with no active bed mirror, something happening inside my own body from several hallways away. No cable, no sensor, nothing physically connecting either of us to the other at all that I could find or explain. Until then, every piece of this had only ever matched on a screen I had to walk over and check for myself, always a few steps behind whatever was already sitting on that monitor. This was the first time the system had shown me something the exact same second it happened inside my own body, with no delay at all between the two, nothing left for me to catch up to. I found my coworker again before heading back to the desk, told her I was fine, that it had already passed. She didn't look convinced, but she let it go, the way people do, when they've decided pressing further would only get them an answer they'd rather not carry around for the rest of a night shift. I noticed it first in a small note buried in the chart, easy to miss if I hadn't been checking it obsessively by then, several times an hour between patients. Patient reported dizziness. Time-stamped 6:11 p.m. I looked at the time on my own phone, 6:10. 1 minute before the note existed, I felt it. A sudden wave of lightheadedness strong enough that I had to lean against the counter to keep from actually going down. My vision narrowing at the edges before it slowly passed, and the hallway came back into focus around me. 2 nights later, a new line appeared. This one worse than anything before it. Patient experienced syncope. I didn't know what the note actually meant for me yet, not until I was halfway through handing off a chart to the next shift, and the room tilted sideways for a few seconds, my knees buckling before a coworker caught my arm and eased me into a chair, the whole hallway going soft and distant around the edges before it snapped back into focus like nothing had happened at all. I checked the chart afterward with my hands still shaking slightly from the fall that hadn't quite happened. The note was already there, time-stamped to the exact minute I'd started to go down, describing an event the system had apparently known about before my own knees did. 3 nights after that, I opened the chart out of habit before rounds even started, and found a line that hadn't existed an hour earlier. Code blue initiated. Room 412. The timestamp beneath it read, 10 minutes from right now. I stood there staring at a clock on the wall and a clock on my phone, both agreeing with each other, both agreeing that whatever this line was describing hadn't happened yet and wouldn't happen for exactly 10 more minutes, according to a system that had never once been wrong about anything it had written down before that night. I didn't wait for the 10 minutes to run out. I walked straight down to 412, needing to see it with my own eyes before whatever the chart was predicting had any chance of arriving first. The door was already open, not propped, not stuck. Open, the way a door sits after someone has just walked through it and hasn't come back yet to close it behind them. The hallway light spilling a narrow wedge across the floor inside. The room was empty, the same as it always was. The monitor beside the bed had gone dark. No line at all now, not even the flat kind, as if it had simply stopped being asked to track anything the moment I stepped through the door. I pulled up the chart on the tablet in my hand, some part of me needing to see the countdown still running, needing proof the 10 minutes hadn't already come and gone somewhere I'd missed it while walking the hallway. The status field had changed. Not admitted, not active. Discharged, time-stamped only a minute earlier. No discharging physician listed. No paperwork attached anywhere in the file. Nobody on this floor having done a single thing to close out a chart that, as far as the system was concerned, had just quietly, officially, ended itself while I was standing in the doorway watching it happen in real time. I checked the countdown from earlier out of habit, half expecting it to have simply vanished along with everything else. It hadn't. Code blue initiated, room 412. The same line still sitting there, the timestamp beneath it now reading 2 minutes from now instead of 10, counting down whether the room had a status to match it or not. My phone buzzed at the nurse's station a few minutes later, an internal message from the front desk asking if I could confirm discharge paperwork for the patient in 412, since the bed was apparently now showing as vacated in the system. I hadn't discharged anyone. I hadn't touched that chart since reading the word discharged in that empty room minutes earlier. Hadn't told a single person on this floor that I'd even gone back there tonight. Not one word to anyone the entire time. The overhead speaker crackled on before I could type a reply. Code blue, room 412. I was already moving before the automated voice finished the sentence. Badge swinging against my chest. Coffee left cold and forgotten on the desk behind me. My footsteps the only sound down a hallway that suddenly felt much longer than it should have. Halfway down the hallway, my radio crackled with the responding assignment. A voice reading off names the way it does for every code on this floor. My own name, read out clearly as the nurse responding to that room. Exactly the way it's read out for every other nurse on every other ordinary night. I stopped outside the door and pulled the chart up one last time before going in. Hands not quite steady enough to make the screen behave on the first try. The tablet slipping slightly against my palm. Patient. My name. Responding nurse. My name. The chart says I arrived 3 minutes ago.